Blessings upon you today. Welcome to our Cornerstone Word for the Week. I'm Pastor A.T. Curry. It's always a joy, honor, and delight to share with you in the study of the Word. I'm super excited about our study today. It's the most interesting study, for one, because it's a text that's not found in the original manuscript of the Bible. And so we'll get into that in just a moment. Of course, this is our weekly study, which also incorporates the upcoming Sunday school study as set forth by the International Sunday School Board curriculum. Uh, we are in a series dealing with where the law falls short, love completes, meaning the Old Testament, the Mosaic law, the traditional way of doing things, where that falls short, love completes. Um, this concludes this unit series. The next unit deals with where the law fails, faith triumphs. And so be sure to catch us next week on that as well. Today we're looking at Jesus prevents two stonings. Two stonings. Stoning was a capital punishment in the day and time in which our text was composed. And we're looking at St. John today, St. John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11, and then verses 56 through 59. That's the Gospel of St. John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11, and verses 56 through 59. Again, verses 1 through 11 are not part of the original text. It was not even added to the Bible until the 6th century. And so 600 years or so after Christ was this added, and even some current Bibles today do not include verses 1 through 11 from his writing. It's clearly something that has been copied and pasted from another writing and then inserted into this text. It does not flow with what happens in chapter 7, neither what happens in verses 12 through 53. And so it's added. So I don't teach this as a historical event. That's not to say it did not necessarily happen, but it's not part of the original Bible that we trust and believe. So we take it as such, pull the good points out of it that we can. And again, somebody might say, well, it sounds like something Jesus might say. Well, that's complete speculation because, again, it's not part of the original Bible. And so it's most interesting. And so let's look and see what the intent of the editor and the writer was, and why it would be pushed to be inserted into our holy canon, our holy Bible. So we want to look at the mindset of the writer. He's trying to give us a picture of Jesus. All right. So St. John, here we go, chapter 8, beginning with verse 1. And it reads, the King James Version says, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives. And again, this is not even close to what was just in chapter 7. So again, it's inserted, it's in a different writing style. And verse 2, and early in the morning, he came again into the temple. There's nothing in chapter 7 about him being in the temple prior to this, at this occasion. And so again, it's copied from some other writing and inserted here. And all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman. Now, again, in our last week's study, we saw where Pharisees and scribes and others were always trying to entrap Jesus. They really despised him. They hated him. And in our previous study, we saw where they tried to entrap him. Bible said, behold, after this Pharisee, after this individual invited Jesus to come and eat with him, it was to trap him. And while he's there, behold, a sick person just shows up, and the person would not normally be invited because their mindset was so traditional, caught up in the old. They thought if the person was sick, it was because of something wrong they had done, and the intended entrapment was to see if Jesus was going to heal this person on the Sabbath, where their tradition told them don't do any work on the Sabbath. And so Jesus says, well, which one of you having an ass that falls into a well on the Sabbath would not immediately go to work to get your ox, your ass, your beast of burden out? You worried about your ass, your oxen. I'm trying to heal a man for life, and you're trying to entrap me with that. In like manner, this writer is saying here that the Pharisees, scribes are trying to entrap Jesus in this case by having a woman show up, and the writer says, who was taken in adultery. They have Jesus here. People are all around. The writer puts this setting in such a way that it's a person who has been convicted of a crime against their law that requires at least two people to be involved. But they just bring one. They bring the woman. And they're trying to see if he's going to do one of three things whereby they can entrap him. They want to see if he's going to say, yeah, she should have been convicted, stone her. So they could then say, well, no, this man is a liar. He's a hypocrite. He goes around talking about compassion, and now he's talking about go ahead and stone her. Number two, if he says go ahead and stone her, they would entrap him on another legal charge, because the law says a Jew could not participate in the capital punishment of one of their own. And then number three, if he says don't stone her, they think they are entrapping him in that way because they're saying he's not keeping the tradition of the Levitical law back in Leviticus, I believe, chapter 20, where it says a particular offense was worthy of stoning, and persons involved ought to be stoned. And so they're trying to entrap him in a threefold way. And let me give it to you in the Messenger translation, verses 3-6, if you will. The religion scholars and Pharisees led in a woman. So again, they're setting them up. She doesn't just happen to be there. They set her up. They lead her in. They literally brought her, who had been caught in an act of adultery. They stood her in plain sight of everyone and said, Teacher, this woman was caught red-handed in the act of adultery. Moses in the law gives orders to stone such persons. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something incriminating, so they could bring charges against him. The writer then goes on in verses 6 through 8 to say, King James Version, this they said, tempting him that they might have to uh, accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. Much speculation has gone into what the writer uh, is trying to imply in terms of what Jesus wrote, why Jesus stooped down, all of that. And again, it's not part of the original manuscript, so uh, so I'm not going to go into why he stooped down, what he possibly wrote, since it's just a story that the writer is giving just to give us a picture of Jesus. So to suggest why he stooped down and to suggest what he possibly could have written if this had actually happened. Not say it did not happen, but again, it's not in the original text, and I teach Bible, so uh, that is what you call eisegesis. Exegesis is what we do. We take out of the text what was meant uh, for such. Eisegesis is adding to the text what you want the text to say to prove your point. So to go into why he stooped down, some would say to humble himself to the woman's level of which he was being accused of. Others say he wrote on the ground the sins of the people around him. Just mere speculation. And so the writer says he stooped down with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. Verse 7, so when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. What is the context? Why would the writer use these words? He who is without sin among you, cast the first stone. Well, during that day and time and in that culture, the capital punishment was often by stoning. And to stone an individual, for that to take place, a witness to the event they are convicted of would throw the first stone. It was like notarizing, it was like verifying, it was like swearing that this person had actually done this. And so all witnesses were required to throw the first stone. That would begin the execution of the individual. That would begin the stoning. And again, for this woman to be accused of what she was accused of, someone else would have to be involved with it. And so it'd have to be at least one other man. And then they said she was convicted in the very act, so it had to be some witnesses to the man and the woman. And so according to how the writer sets it up, a whole lot of folk there could have been involved at one point or another in this conspiracy, if you will. And so since the custom was for the witnesses to throw the first stone, that's why the writer says that Jesus says, he that is without sin among you, let him cast a stone at her. Messenger translation, verses 6 through 8. Jesus bent down, wrote with his finger in the dirt. They kept at him, badgering him. He straightened up and said, the sinless one among you, go first. In other words, the one among you who has not sinned at all, whether that means with this woman in their mind or in some other act, the sinless one among you, go first. Throw the stone. Go ahead, carry it out. You who have no sin. Bending down again, he wrote some more in the dirt. And verses 9 and 10, King James Version says, "And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last." Now, why would this writer say beginning with the eldest all the way to the youngest? Again, it's not part of the original Bible, it's not part of the original text. So to speculate on that would be mere conjecture. One person who commented on this, one commentator, one theologian, uh, said that perhaps it was the oldest because they had the most sin. But again, that is pure speculation, conjecture, and so no need to go into that. Is what the writer wrote, injected into the text here. And it says, "And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus lifted up himself," verse 10, "and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Have no man condemned thee?" Messenger translation. "Hearing that, they walked away one after another, beginning with the oldest. The woman was left alone. Jesus stood up and spoke to her. Woman, where are they? Does no one condemn you?" "No one, Master." "Neither do I," said Jesus. "Go on your way. From now on, don't sin." Don't sin. And again, this is not part of the original manuscript. So if you happen to have a Bible and this is not in it, that is why. All right. And so the title that the commentators for this Sunday school study chose, "Jesus prevents two stonings." That's the first stoning. And then finally in verses 56 through 59 of this same chapter, John chapter 8, it talks about another stoning attempt. Verse 56. And to get the context of this, let's go back to 54. Jesus answered, and again, they're accusing him of blasphemy and everything else. Jesus answered, "If I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father that honoreth me, of whom ye say that he is your God, of whom ye say." So Jesus is pointing out their hypocrisy again, just as in the past. "Yet ye have not known him, but I know him. And if I should say I know him not, I shall be a liar like unto you. But I know him, the Father, and I keep his saying." Verse 56, "Your father Abraham." So he's talking to those who claim to be biological descendants of Abraham. And now these verses were part of the original manuscript, unlike verses 1 through 11. And so they were at least biological descendants of Abraham. You remember the promise God made to Abraham, "I'll make your descendants great," and all of that. And so the underlying tone right here is that Abraham may be you may be a biological descendant of Abraham, but obviously not a spiritual descendant of him. If so, you would think otherwise. You would have a different behavior. You would have a different disposition of heart. And so he says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." Let me give it to you in the Messenger translation, and I need to go back to verse 54 and come back to 56. Jesus said, "If I was striving to get all the attention, it wouldn't amount to anything. But my Father, the same one you say is your Father." So again, you see the underlying tone. The same one you say is your Father. So it must be biologically and not spiritually, is what Jesus is saying. "Put me here at this time and place of splendor. You haven't recognized him in this, but I have. If I, in false modesty, said I didn't know what was going on, I would be as much of a liar as you are. But I do know, and I am doing what he says. Abraham, your father, with elated faith, looked down the corridors of history and saw my day coming. He saw it and cheers. And then listen to how these haters of Jesus respond. Then said the Jews unto him, Thou art not yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham? In other words, you're talking about somebody for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you're not even 50, and you're talking about he saw you and your glory in that day. And get this classic line. Jesus said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, verily, verily. Whenever Jesus says something twice, it means whatever you do, don't miss this. I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. And that's the type of God we serve. He is, I am. He is whatever you need him to be, and he's able to do whatever you need done. He is the great I am. Moses was worried about the children of Israel being in bondage, and the Lord tells him, man, go speak to Pharaoh. And Moses said, man, he'll try to kill me. He said, no, when you go, and he asked you who sent him, he said, just tell him I am sent you. That's the type of God that we serve. He is the I am God. And then verse 59, I know you've been wondering, where's the second stoning? The title implicates two stonings Jesus prevents. The first one we saw in the added text, verses 1 through 11, where he prevents the stoning of the woman caught in an act that they thought was worth stoning. And then here's the second one, verse 59, after Jesus proclaims, before Abraham was, I am, then took they up stones to cast at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. It was not yet his time. He hid himself, went out of the temple. And so the second stoning he prevents is his own. You got it. Going through the midst of them, and so passed by. Thank God for that on today. I pray this has given you some insight into this study, this text today, and how to handle text that may not necessarily be historical from the original manuscript, but yet have been included in the Bible, how to look at it and get value out of it. Listen, I'm super excited about our next week's study as we begin a new series study. Again, this series was on where the law falls short, love completes. Now we'll be looking at where the law fails, faith triumphs. And so next week, read in advance Romans chapter 2, verses 12 through 24, and verses 28 through 29. May the Lord bless you and keep you real good. Again, I'm Pastor A.T. Curry. Come check us out in person, 640 Ebenezer Church Road, Fayetteville, Georgia. Is on at Cornerstone every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. We'd be delighted to see you. Won't you be a blessing to the ministry? Won't you give today? You can give by way of Cash App at $CStone Give. That's $CSTONEGIVE. You can give by way of Givelify.com. Just pull us up, Cornerstone Baptist Church, Fayetteville, Georgia. And of course, you can give by way of U.S. mail right to us. Checks, money orders you can send. Cornerstone Church, P.O. Box 2734, Peachtree City, Georgia, 30269. And certainly you can always come and give in person and by credit and or debit card. Until next time, continue to be blessed, and I'll be praying for you. God bless.